Ramayana, which is so central to our very civilization, that too was not spared. The Ramayana has been reduced to a work of fiction. They call it a fictitious work. They call it something that the Hindus made up. If you go anywhere in Bharat, be it north, be it south, east, west, anywhere in this sacred geography, you will find not just temples but historical markers. What is a temple? I believe the root of a civilization. Without roots, no matter how mighty the tree cannot survive. There are lakhs of temples which were occupied, misappropriated, and converted into places of gatherings for other faiths with the intention of attacking your roots, not with the intention of, furthering some other faith. How will you justify that 25 generations of your own ancestors did not get to step on Ram Janmabhoomi? How do you justify it? And they never will, because they're gone. They spent their entire lifetime fighting the good fight, being a part of this movement. But they will never get to see the Ram Janmabhoomi movement come to an end. So do you think it's going to ever amount to justice? I do believe that why there was no carnage at the end of the Kar Seva was because of what Ramayana means to everyday Hindus. It is not something that we are scared of. It is not a couple of rules that we look up to. But it is something that we live in our daily lives. Jai Shri Ram. Jai Shri Ram. Jai Shri Ram. That's more like it. Firstly, I would like to thank everybody for coming here today. I think time is a very precious gift, and many of you here have chosen to give it to me twice. First for my launch for a Hindu in Oxford, which happened here, and now for this book. So thank you once again for giving me your time, something I can never return. I do believe that until the lion learns how to write, every story will glorify the hunter. And that's what's been happening to the Hindu community. Our history, our identity has been sullied and it has been vilified time and again to no ends. Ramayana, which is so central to our very civilization, that too was not spared. If you look at historical analysis of the Ramayana, contemporary history books by very eminent so-called historians of our times, you will see that the Ramayana has been reduced to a work of fiction. They call it a fictitious, work. They call it something that the Hindus made up. Some historians have also gone to the very extent of calling Ramayana a conflict between farming communities in the Vindhyan and the Ganga plains, and that the Hindus somehow exaggerated it when they wrote about it, and hence came Ramayana. That, it was nothing as such. It was just some kind of a fight, two farming communities, one here in the Vindhyan region and one over the other side in the Ganga area. They were just having some fights. And the Hindus, they just hallucinated in this sense of grandeur, and then they proceeded to write a very celebrated version of that, and that is Ramayana. And that nothing of that sort actually happened. They tried to call it a figment, from everything from a figment of imagination to myth, to then to admitting that maybe it did happen, but if it did happen, it was just a skirmish between two communities. It's been sullied, vilified, and reduced to what I said, glorification of the hunter. So every story out there glorifies the hunter. But I think one very beautiful thing about the Ramayana when I started researching for this book is that if you go anywhere in Bharat, be it north, be it south, east, west, anywhere in this sacred geography, you will find not just temples but historical markers which coincide with different, aspects of the Ramayana. Where Jatayu fell, there is the Lepakshi Mandir. Where, Rama and Sita, they were in their exile and, they were leading their life. There is a mandir there. There's mandir at every point within Bharat to signify every little aspect of Ramayana. Now, how can you, bring an entire country together like that if it was just an act of imagination? There is the Ram Setu. When they initially found the Ram Setu in its sunken form, they said, "Oh, it is just a natural creation. It's a natural bridge, some kind of a sandbank." But upon a further survey, it was found that it was man-made. That it was in no way a sandbank that just appeared out of nowhere because of tectonic shifts, and it does reinforce the story of Ramayana. Not just that, if you look into local tales, local fables, in local languages in any of these regions, you will find versions of the Ramayana corresponding to what happened in those regions. For instance, in Lepakshi, a mandir in and around, you will find contemporary stories which talk about the falling of, Jatayu. In those, in that folk sense, in their folk language. How does something so imaginary seep into the conscience of people so tightly? It's not possible. In fact, many, authors and thinkers of the West have spoken about how ruthless time is. There's actually a poem called the Ozymandias, and in that they say that time is so ruthless that even the mightiest of kings, their visages are reduced to rubble. In that poem, it so goes that there's a traveler and he's just traveling in the desert, and his feet, it hits a sculpture, and then he tries to brush aside the sand to see what is there. And then there's the bust of a king. It looks like it's the bust of a man, and in fact it was the bust of a very important king in the bygone times. But time is so unforgiving, nobody remembers that man anymore. And least of all the traveler. He thought it's just another piece of trash lying there in the desert, and put more sand on it so that it doesn't go and hit somebody else's feet whilst walking on the desert. So that's how great, points in history have been reduced to nothing by time. With time, nothing is remembered. But Ramayana even today is lived. It is narrated with the same fervor as if it happened yesterday. So it's something that cannot be mythical. So if you wanted to go beyond just the archaeological evidence and you wanted to look into socio-cultural evidences, there's that. And not just that, time itself. It has withstood the test of time. Something only so real could have done that. And it has managed to do it. So it's history, not mythology. And that is something that we need to establish, because our generation might feel it. But 2-3 generations down the line, it is these history books taught in premier institutions which propon Ramayana as conflicts between, Vindhyans and the Gangetic Plain farming communities, which is going to be remembered. And it is tragic. From there comes the whole concept of temples. What is a temple? It is, I believe, the root of a civilization. Without roots, no matter how mighty the tree cannot survive. The tree will die if you put sugar near the roots of a tree. A mighty tree, you want to fell a mighty tree, you don't need an axe, you don't need many man hours. All you need is a little bit of sugar, and you need to go sprinkle it near its roots so that ants start gnawing at it and the roots are gone. Once the roots are gone, the tree ceases to exist. So no matter how beautiful the civilization and how much we like to say that, oh, the Hindu Dharma is so vast and so, ever present, and we have so many practitioners, without our roots we are nothing. In Brihad Samhita it is written where the Hindus built their temples. They built their temples where the gods played. So to put it in contemporary sense, these are places of natural confluence. So usually there are temples where there's a Shiva Linga, which is, a symmetrical occurring of a rock. It doesn't happen anywhere. It happens where there's highest resonance of all 5 earthly elements. And these are spots we recognized as our temples. So when the invaders came, they conquered all of, the vast lands. Then why did they go and build their places of gathering on top of our places of worship? There was so much land available, land for all you could see. But why do we find places of gatherings of other faiths built upon the foundations of our places of worship? Why? Because that is exactly the act of sprinkling sugar over the roots of a mighty tree. Instead of using force, all you do is take that little bit of sugar. That's what's been happening. And it is not just one temple. We might think that it's just Ayodhya. Okay, after the Ayodhya movement, we were pushed to believe that it is, okay, Ayodhya, Kashi, Mathura. But that's not where it stops. There are lakhs of temples. In fact, there are temples in your own district which were occupied, misappropriated, and converted into places of gatherings for other, faiths, with the intention of attacking your roots, not with the intention of, furthering some other faith. And this book actually puts in a list, actually. It's an alphabetical list. It goes state-wise and it goes district-wise of the various, places of worship in your districts, which were once temples. And the need of the hour right now really is for common citizens to file a simple petition in their local courts so that we can start that collective movement of saving our roots. Because the question is about what is happening to our roots and how do we really, reclaim it. Then comes the big question of justice, really. What is justice? There is so much said and done about justice. There is so much moral high ground that so many people take when it comes to justice. What is justice really? Is justice merely a court ruling? Is justice the undoing of something wrong? Is justice really saying sorry about something that happened and coming to a point where you apologize for things and you let go of your feelings about a situation? No, I think justice is very deep. And justice is not something that we can even define within contemporary terms or contemporary mechanisms which are available to us right now in any shape or form. How will you justify that 25 generations of your own ancestors did not get to step on Ram Janmabhoomi? How do you justify it? And they never will. Because they're gone. They spent their entire lifetime fighting the good fight, being a part of this movement. But they will never get to see the Ram Janmabhoomi movement come to an end. So do you think it's going to ever amount to justice? Really? No, it's not going to be justice. Another aspect is all of the car sevaks who died because of the police firing which was, ordered by the government of the day. Was there any accountability attached? Was there ever an inquiry that was held into whether it was judicial or extrajudicial? We talk so much about extrajudicial killings. We talk so much about killings which happen outside the remit of law. Then how do we justify these killings? How do we justify the fact that people who were killed by police firing were not even allowed the dignity of a proper funeral? We give funerals to convicted felons who get death penalty in our country. But our car sevaks, rocks were tied to them and they were thrown into the Sarayu so that even Buoyancy wouldn't lift their dead bodies up and, none of the Hindu community could actually recover it and then give it a proper cremation. So when you think of justice, I think it becomes a very abstract concept. And unfortunately, that is something that we need to really question and remember, especially in times when all stories are busy glorifying the hunters. I went on a thing about justice and about temples. Well, it's not something that is just restricted to Bharat. We'd be, I think we are also compelled to think in that sense that, oh, what is this? Bharatiya people, so backward, you're still stuck talking about temples. Why are you doing this? Give me one contemporary example around the world. Well, hello, if you go to Hagia Sophia, which is one of the most celebrated mosques today in Istanbul, and if you go to the very basement, you will see the foundations of the Temple of Artemis there. You will see that indigenous faiths like Mendeism and Nepotism, they were, pushed to the brink of extinction just because they couldn't preserve what was their own and they couldn't reclaim it when their temples were destroyed, when other places of worship were built upon the visages literal ruins of their places of worship. That's where we end up. So there's so much of history and contemporary stories to follow if we really want to talk about it. One of the most, I think, controversial questions that anybody gets is, oh, do you support the car seva? Then everybody comes into this, point where you're like, you don't want to address that question. You don't want to talk about it because you don't know whether you're in agreement of it or not, or whether, the means justifies the end, or, you get caught up in this whole question. And I know that many well-meaning Hindus have lots of questions about this and haven't been really able to come to terms with it. Though they've come to terms with the mandir and they believe that the mandir was necessary, they somehow have all of these, notions about the very movement. Well, I think movements have happened all across the world. We've had revolutions everywhere. We've had French Revolution. We've had great revolutions for, even in the US, we've had modern revolutions. We've had wars. We've had different kinds of contemporary revolutions. In each of these revolutions, the foot soldiers always got carried away. There was always carnage at the end of every big revolution or every big movement. And it is never talked about in, history, because they say, the means justify the end, so we don't talk about it. We don't talk about the innocents who died. We don't talk about the, innocent people who lost a sense of livelihood. We don't talk about it because we believe that, okay, it was the movement which was necessary, and look, they were oppressed for so long. Be it the entire, Palestine-Hamas conflict. There are many people who choose to look at it the same way. Many people. But there are many other older movements as well. But if you look at the movement in Ayodhya, you will see that irrespective of the entire movement being 500 years long, irrespective of countless Hindus dying in the process, irrespective of the fact that you could see the foundations of a temple inside, you could literally see the temple, like it was physically visible, irrespective of countless British judges saying that we understand your case, but we can't do anything about it, irrespective of that, none of the foot soldiers got carried away. At that point, there were close to 100 mosques in Ayodhya. Had this been even equivalent to any other movement out there, like the French Revolution or anything, there would have been carnage unleashed upon all other places of worship, all other mosques. But not one scratch was laid upon any mosque, except for the one controversial structure built upon Ram Janmabhoomi. So there was clarity of thought. So if you really compare this with respect to contemporary movements as well, you will see that contemporary movements have committed war crimes, actual crimes against innocence, and these have been brushed under the carpet very conveniently because of the greatness of what the movement signified. And here we have a great movement which is just being vilified to no end. And if you draw the comparison, you know where we stand, really. And these points are something which unfortunately our own people don't know. Because the lion can't write, it's only the hunter glorified in the story. And unfortunately, we are also consuming that same kind of narrative that comes our way. That is the one thing. I think in my study and observation of the entire movement, tracing it to 500 years, I do believe that why there was no carnage at the end of the Kar Seva was because of what Ramayana means to everyday Hindus. It is not something that we are scared of. It is not a couple of rules that we look up to and a line in the sand that we draw. But it is something that we live in our daily lives. They are morals we try to embody in our daily lives. We fail sometimes, but it is the moral that we hold ourselves up to. It is something that we live. If you look at the very small, aspect of when money was collected for the Ram Mandir. So all of the money was collected from the people. And when the volunteers were going across Bharat collecting money for Ram Janmabhoomi, there's one story that actually stayed with me a lot. There was a destitute woman. She was homeless, she was destitute, she was on the streets out there, and she was in a terrible condition. She was older, she was an older woman, 60 plus, and she sees these volunteers, milling around in their cab, and then she asks them, what are you doing, kids? And, they say, oh, we are collecting money for Ram Janmabhoomi, and we are making a Ram Mandir, and this is the money for that. And then she, puts her hand inside the corner of one of her pockets, an inner pocket, and she removes 20 rupees. And by the crumple of the 20 rupee, you can say that this is the last 20 rupees that she has. She has no more money really. Last 20 rupees she removes and she gives it to them, saying that this is my donation for the Ram Mandir. And they refuse to take it. They absolutely refuse to take it. They say that, oh, you have the sentiment that you want to contribute. That itself is such a huge thing, and that itself is a million, rupees equivalent for the Ram Mandir. Please don't give it. But she's adamant. Then they say, okay, please, we will take 10 rupees from you, and the other 10 rupees you hold on to it. Because they're so scared that, if she has an emergency, she has nothing left. She's out there on the streets. She's still not convinced. So they come up with this scheme to convince her that it's only 10 rupees they can take, that it's their compulsion. They say that, oh, Amma, we only have receipts for 10 rupees and we're only supposed to give one receipt per person's name. So since you're one person, I can only give you one receipt in your name and I can only give it to you for 10 rupees. Just they make up an excuse, really, to make her feel that, okay, it's just 10 rupees that you give me. And the woman says, you take 10 rupees in my name and you take 10 rupees in my dead son's name. That is the kind of, dedication that she has. And if you look at the West, philanthropy, charity, only the rich do it. Once people cross a certain threshold, people do all kinds of things. Oh, fundraiser, this, that. It's not a thing that poor people or middle class people do. But charity comes naturally to everybody here, irrespective of whether they are destitute or tomorrow if they give away what they have nothing left for themselves. Irrespective of that, charity comes naturally to them. How do you think it comes naturally to them? Because we embody these values. We embody what the squirrels did during the construction of the Ram Setu. The squirrels knew that their contribution to Ram Setu is nothing. But they still did it. Irrespective of the insults they faced, everything, they would roll themselves in the sand and they would go brush it off on the Ram Setu. Because they thought that their intention mattered, that their act mattered, and that what they did really, really mattered, that intentions do matter. And for them, it was not about building that bridge. It was about something terrible that had happened to, Sita Ma, to Shakti, and that needs to be rectified. It was about that intention. What do you think is the intention of these people who give 10, 20 of their last rupees? It is not to build a magnificent temple that they can, have some ego about. It's about Ram Janmabhoomi and, reclaiming the very, very roots which give them those selfless values and which give them courage to live through destitution. So it is that very reason why our people do what they do. If you look at, Bharat's history, there's no way we can be where we are today because we've had, terrible sort of political conditions for the past 1,000 years of loot. And then we were left with a begging bowl and we were left with a government which was not so, adept at managing such a huge population and resources. But how are we still here in spite of everything? How are we still there? Because we never use terrible situations as an excuse not to excel. We put values above everything and we let these values guide us. If you look at the West, the minute inflation hits the ceiling and people are extremely poor, you know what becomes common? Crimes become very common. There's pickpocketing rampage and crimes are at an all-time high. We were so poor for so long. Was crime rate that high? No. Compared to the population, no. Irrespective of what the West tries to tell us, there is no rampant pickpocketing. If you're walking out there on the street and there are poor people, they're not trying to grab onto what you have. In spite that, you have this sentiment that you want to share what you have with you. Because the morals kept us going, irrespective of the situation that we were in. And I think that is something that Ramayana gave us. And it is everyday, it is lived. It really reminds us that we are one people. When the Kar Seva happened, people of all caste, all creed, every corner came, irrespective of, their background, their community, everything. One of the first people to go to jail for the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, it was the Nihang Sikhs. because they had written on the dhacha, they had with koila, they had written Shri Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Shri Ram, Jai Shri Ram, Jai Shri Ram. They went to jail. They were one of the first people to go to jail. So without all of this, we are a broken people. It is Ram Janmabhoomi which reminds us that we are one people, irrespective of whether we are from the north or the south. That we are one people, irrespective of what religion we follow under the dharmic umbrella. That we are one people, irrespective of the community or philosophy that we follow within our dharma. And without it, we are just one shattered civilization. Dhanyavad.